Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the One Touch family. And by Dexcom, take control of your diabetes with the world's first continuous glucose monitoring system that sends glucose readings directly to your compatible smart device. Live life on your own terms with Dexcom. Hi, it's Stacy. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
This week, 3 of Meri Schuhmacher-Jackson's 4 sons have type 1 diabetes. You'd think that would be enough, but then she lost her husband to cancer. Incredibly, she found love again. Through it all, Meri has presented an amazing attitude in her blog and her writings, but she says she's not really as chipper as many people seem to think.
So they don't really look at the big oops. They look at the end result of what I've learned from it. So I think I'm tricking everybody into thinking that I'm, got it more together than I do.
We'll talk about how Meri handles those oops moments, the transition from having little ones with type 1 to big teenagers now, and how her big blended family, 9 kiddos, is working out. Plus, I sampled a newer product called ProYo at a diabetes walk recently. I thought it would be fun to find out why they're supporting people with diabetes and how something like this comes to market. Nathan Carey explains how he started the business.
And it's like, wow, here's a person that's trying to be healthy. They're trying to eat good. They want to eat something that actually tastes good, yet, they're really not enjoying this experience.
And Sparrow Rose continues. It's our chance to help kids get their hands on desperately needed basic type 1 diabetes supplies. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm Stacy Sims, and I'm so glad to have you along once again. If you are new to the show, we try to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes through stories of connection, talking to bloggers and authors and stars, prominent people in our community, and also to everyday people touched by diabetes who aren't pro athletes or, speaking to stadium crowds. And all this month, I'm going to be speaking about Spare a Rose. This is a very smart campaign to address a very real problem. Diabetes in developing countries can be a death sentence. It's hard to think about it that way, but that's the truth. And so this Valentine's Day, which is today, if you're listening as this episode is being released on the day that it goes out, it's Valentine's Day. So consider donating the cost of just 1 rose to the campaign, and that can keep a child with type 1 alive for a month. If you donate the cost of 12 roses, that can cover a whole year. I have a lot more information and links on diabetes-connections.com, and all the money goes directly to Life for a Child, an International Diabetes Federation program. All the info is there. Please check it out and consider giving what you can. I have a sponsor for the Sparrow Rose campaign here on the podcast, and that is Wild Tree, and I'll tell you more about them coming up. But, Animas has been a big supporter of Sparrow Rose since the very beginning, and I was excited to see that with the new insulin delivery system, Animas and One Touch are coming together. I've been really happy with Animas and its products for the nearly 10 years we've been using Animas pumps for Benny, for my son. We also love the One Touch products that help us make managing his diabetes more simple. Putting those 2 brands together makes perfect sense to me. Now One Touch has an even wider range of products available to help people confidently move forward in managing their diabetes. To find out more about Animas, part of the One Touch family, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Animas part of the One Touch family logo. This is camp registration time. I know a lot of you without kids, or maybe with kids who haven't yet been to camp, are thinking, what? Camp? It's February. It's snowing out. But now is the time. It really is. If you've listened before, I'm a huge believer in camp. It is a big tradition in my whole family. I went, my sister went, my dad went. Everybody goes. And diabetes camp has been amazing for Benny. We do have a week-long sleepaway program in our area. We have a 3-day day camp around here. That 3-day day camp is put on by our endocrinology practice, and they take little kids. I think Benny went there when he was 3 or 4 for the first time, and it's just fabulous. And I've shared that I send both of my kids away to a month-long non-diabetes sleepaway camp. They do have a medical staff, but they don't really know much about type 1. We have been called a little crazy for that, but my son, he pretty much pushed to go, and he does what it takes to stay there. He's been doing that since he was 8 years old. And that camp starts registration in the fall. I mean, I just got a note from them saying, wear your health and medical forms. So, man, we're already into camp season, which is crazy. But if you're thinking about diabetes camp, at least in my area, they fill up pretty quickly. So start to get the information. Most of those opened on February 1st. Some of them will open in March. I will link up a lot of info at diabetes-connections.com. Project Blue November has terrific camp info. The American Diabetes Association, of course, runs a lot of these. And, you know, scholarships are generally available. I mean, let's face it, camp is expensive. And, you know, especially if you have more than one child going. Scholarships are generally available, though, through the ADA or through the Lions Club, through organizations like that. So please ask around. Nobody wants a kid to miss diabetes camp because of cost. So all that information will be available at diabetes-connections.com. And this year, I'm also organizing, we did this really casually last year, but it was a big hit, so I've got to be more formal, a coffee after everybody drops their kids off at that day camp. I mean, that's the first time a lot of parents have been away from their child at all. I mean, if you're talking a 3, 4, 5-year-old, that kid may have not have been to preschool or kindergarten yet. So we had a coffee where I was joking about pouring Kahlua in everybody's coffee. I didn't have to go that far, but that was a lot of fun. So something like that can help you connect on your local level as well. Okay, so you know I'm trying to raise my kids, both of them, with independence, confidence, and responsibility. I was pleasantly surprised that using the share function of the Dexcom system helps with that. Using the separate Dexcom Follow app, we can help Benny manage diabetes in real time at school, at a friend's, at a sleepover, overnight field trip. We've done that, and that gives us peace of mind and helps him feel like diabetes isn't holding him back. With the Dexcom G5 mobile CGM system, dynamic glucose data can be accessed and shared safely and conveniently anywhere, anytime, to your compatible smart device as long as there's an internet connection. The Dexcom G5 Mobile is the only CGM approved for adults and children ages 2 and older with diabetes. Do not make treatment decisions based upon share and follow readings. Always confirm with your compatible smart device or Dexcom receiver. For more information, go to Dexcom.com. My guest this week is someone who I have been following for years, probably pretty close to my son's diagnosis time. She is a very talented writer. She writes with such empathy and goodness. And the only way I can really explain Meri Schuhmacher-Jackson is that when I first saw her in person at a crowded conference, you know, all the way across the room, I didn't even think. I just yelled out, "Meri, Meri!" And I ran over and I introduced myself and I gave her a big hug. And instead of calling security, she hugged me right back. And Meri's story is unique in that 3 of her 4 biological children have type 1 diabetes. She has 4 boys, and she recently remarried. So this family now has 9 children, ranging in age from 13 to 23. There is so much to talk about. Meri Schuhmacher-Jackson, welcome to Diabetes Connections. And I hope I didn't scare you a couple years ago when I knocked you down with that hug.
Oh, absolutely not. That's par for the course at conferences.
I want to start out by talking about one specific story. As you listen, as you can imagine from the intro, and Meri's first husband passed away, but is still a big part of her writing and in your life, I assume, Meri, and I want to talk about that as well. But the story I want to start with is one of the first I remember reading. And am I right? Did you have all 3 kids? As I said, you have 4 boys and 3 have type 1. Did they all jump in the pool with their insulin pumps on at one point?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, they did.
And these were not waterproof pumps?
No, they were Medtronic pumps at the time. And it was actually the day before we left for Disneyland. And they were at swimming lessons. And 2 of them jumped into the pool at the same time with their pumps. And we had to have the new pumps sent to Disneyland. And while we were waiting for the new pumps to come to Disneyland, the 3rd child at Disneyland jumped into the pool with his pump. So big winning week there for me. So Medtronic sent 3 pumps to Disneyland one week for us.
What happens at Disneyland when you get a shipment like that? Do you just go to the hotel lobby and you have to sign for something? Do they look at you weird, like, what's this medical equipment? Or you just take the box and say, thank you?
You would think so, but they act like it's the most normal thing. It was like no big deal. You just went to the desk and got your box, and it was all good. They were all set up. But I do have PTSD from that experience, and constantly I'm worried about pumps and water. It's a insane phobia I have now. But they send them the next day. It's really, and I had backup pumps. When you have diabetes for so many years, you've always got an extra laying around. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
But still, I just remember reading about that and thinking, all 3 within a couple of days.
I know. What are they all? Only Meri. Only Meri.
Well, and I wanted to start with that story because having read you for a number of years and having met you, I think there is a feeling that since you have had, you've had struggle. It's not easy to have 3 of your 4 kids have type 1. You lost your husband to cancer in a very sudden way. I think a lot of people think of you as this model of perfection and, oh, Meri, how does she do it? And I know there's a lot of that. I'm not trying to say it's not, but I say that I wanted to start there because you're not perfect and you share how much you're not perfect, which is such a favor to the rest of us.
I know, and it boggles my mind that people have this perception of me, and I think they do because I'm able, when I'm writing and getting it out, it's part of my therapy to spin things into a positive way and to learn something from it and to laugh from it. So they don't really look at the big oops. They look at the end result of what I've learned from it. So I think I'm tricking everybody into thinking that I'm, got it more together than I do.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's delve deep beneath the surface. No, let's start at the beginning though. When your second son was diagnosed with type 1, he was very young. Was he a baby?
Yes, he was 8 months. 8 months old. It was a mess.
And your oldest was how old at that time?
2.
Okay, so you have a toddler and you have a very ill little baby. How did you figure it out?
He went down to he was 8 months and he went down to 14 pounds. And I kept bringing him into the doctor saying something's not right, but he was happy and tenacious. And I'd bring him in for diaper rashes and for thrush and just skinny and for wetting the bed. And the doctor just kept giving me stuff to fix the symptoms. And it just kind of all came to a head one night when he went into ketoacidosis, obviously, and was throwing up nonstop. So I brought him into the emergency room. And believe it or not, he was seizing, having seizures, and we almost lost him. It took a good 8 hours for them to figure out what the problem was. And that was only when my pediatrician came in, and he's like, wait a minute. We need to test this child for diabetes. And nobody thought that a tiny little baby would have type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, I can relate to that in that my son was diagnosed right before he turned 2, and his pediatrician said, it sounds like classic symptoms, but I've never seen it in anybody younger than 2, so bring him in and we'll rule it out. Right. And I can't even imagine if a very young infant, although I think people know better now, although many health professionals still don't, but 8 months old is awfully young. Was it a long recovery? How does it, I hate to ask it this way, but how does it work in a child that little once you figure out what's wrong?
Well, thankfully, it could have been so much worse. I've read the stories. I've seen people where it's turned the other way and their brain damage and things like that. But he, as soon as he got the insulin, plumped up right away. He was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days and came home, and he was just him same self.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So we were one of the lucky ones. But, back in the day, we were on crazy insulins, regular and NPH and Lente and, just all the, so there was a lot of, since he couldn't tell me how he was feeling, it was very anxious time for me. There's no sleeping through the night. It was every 2 hours check. And, things aren't supposed to peak. Lente wasn't supposed to peak, but it did in him. And it was a hard couple years.
This is 18 years ago, 19 years ago?
Yeah, 19 years ago.
Wow. And then he starts getting better, as hard as that life is, because, again, with an 8-month-old, and you have another child.
Yeah, 4 years later, I had Ben. And it was so euphoric because he was big and healthy and happy and the easiest baby, and 8 months came and he was still easy.
Did you worry about that 8 months? Was that a milestone?
Yeah, it was always in the back of my head, always, but he was just happy. Jack, on the other hand, who was diagnosed as a baby, was just miserable all the time. And he was just really hard, because he was either really high or low and he didn't know how to communicate that. So his first year was really hard. And Ben's was so easy. I was like, wow, babies are awesome. And so 2 years after Ben, we had Luke.
And Luke was also an easy baby at first with everything?
He was a little miracle baby. They were sure that things were going to be wrong. And when he was born, there were all these doctors around waiting to whisk him away. And they took him out and they're like, wait a minute, this is a healthy baby. And they just, all was well. It was just a really crazy. So I was just so thankful, that, he's okay. That he was just such a blessing. We just had it was just awesome to have our 4 boys, and everybody was great.
And not to pry too much, but with Luke, it was not about diabetes. There were other health issues they were concerned about when he was being born.
Right. They were worried about, when they did the ultrasounds, they saw things, and they were concerned that when he was born, that nothing came to fruition.
That's great.
So we were very thankful.
Wow. And when was Luke diagnosed? How old was he?
Luke was 2. Wow. And it was, needless to say, a much easier transition for us because we put him on a pump right away. He was on, Humalog right away. And he could tell me when he was hungry or when he was thirsty,
right,
which is huge.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just the whole and we just grabbed the bull by the horns, and we've done this and we can do this. And Jack had this, secret. He kind of felt guilty, but at the same time felt great that he wasn't alone in all of this and he could help his brother. So, we just ran with it.
Wait a minute. I'm out of order now. So Jack.
No, you're in order.
So it's Jack and then the youngest, Luke, and then Ben is later, the middle?
Yeah, Ben was diagnosed 1 year after Luke.
Oh, so they just didn't have the good manners to go in age order.
Right? Ben was diagnosed a year later at the age of 5, right before going into kindergarten. And that one, he took great. I mean, he was excited that he was going to get a pump like his brothers. And it was a little crazy. But I didn't take that one so well. That's when I kind of went into my deep depression of what am I doing? Am I breaking my kids? Is this my fault? Why do I have 3? Nobody has 3 kids with type 1. So I kind of went into this woe is me phase.
Can you even imagine? I'm going to jump in here for a moment. We'll find out how Meri came to accept her family's unique situation. Woe is me is right. I mean, that's just amazing. But I want to tell you about a generous supporter of the Spare a Rose campaign. My local Wild Tree rep, Julie, is saving dinner at my house a couple of times a week now. And Wild Tree is committed to developing products that fit the needs of your family, are easy to use, and taste great. They really believe in the importance of creating nutritious dinnertime solutions. This isn't a dinner in a box, with weird stuff your kids are not going to eat. You put together your own fresh produce and veggies with their super simple recipes and delicious spices, seasonings, and recipes. Family-friendly meals my kids and my husband will eat, plus nutritional information on everything, which, with type 1, we need that. I love it. Learn more about Wild Tree and place an order with my friend Julie. I recommend when you click there, start out with their grapeseed oil, something really simple like that you'll use all over the place. Or start with the Make Fresh dinner bundles. Listen, Julie's Wild Tree has donated $1,000 to Spare a Rose. Yeah, let's show her some love. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Wild Tree logo to place your order. And if you go there and you can't decide, email me. I will help you out, or ping me on social media, because I have my favorites and my family does too. Now let's get back to Meri. She was talking about the feeling that she was somehow failing her children after 3 of her 4 boys were diagnosed with type 1.
So I kind of went into this woe is me for 6 months. And thankfully, my husband had the good wisdom to snap me out of it and make me look at the bright side of things and, tell me, look, we have so much to be thankful for, and we need to fight for a good life for these boys, and they need their mom to be happy as much as she can be. And it was literally after this sweet conversation we had one night, we kind of flipped the switch, and I did. I was able to turn the corner, and it wasn't long after that I started my blog.
Wow. All right, well, I'm going to keep you wallowing for just a minute before we move on, because I think that you deserve to. I mean, I had one kid, and I let myself wallow here and there. But how was Max? Max is your oldest son, right?
Yeah.
How was he during all of this? I mean, as you said, Ben was almost excited. I mean, little kids are funny. They want to be like their big brothers. They want to, it doesn't matter if somebody has glasses or diabetes. It's like, oh, that's cool. I want that.
Right.
Was he a caregiver? Was he resentful? Any idea what was going through his head?
That is the question I get asked the most. It always boggles my mind, because I'm like, why would somebody think that he'd be resentful? But I guess there would be children that were. Max is a special kid. He is perpetually kind and humble and loving. He is the sweetest oldest brother that there is. And I don't think it would ever occur to him. He was just happy it wasn't him, and just gave them all the support they needed. And it wasn't any big deal at the time. Didn't feel like it.
That's really nice. I mean, my daughter and I have been very open about this. In fact, I interviewed her. We did our 10-year anniversary show where I interviewed everybody in the family, and she and I had a great discussion about, resentment and jealousy and wanting time, and how since she's 15 now, and how she's kind of come around and understanding it more, and she almost feels guilty that she gave me a hard time, which is crazy, because then you have this cycle of, natural kid behavior and feeling bad about it. So we've been really lucky that we've been able to, it was never bad, but that we've been able to really clear the air and have those conversations. So when you looked at their ages at the time, I mean, really young, toddler, kindergarten age, and now those boys are teenagers, right? They're all in their teens?
Yeah, they're hairy, stinky teenagers now. We're so sweet and innocent, and I had control over everything, and now I have control over nothing. It's a completely different world. If I had to start my blog now versus then, it'd be a completely different blog.
Why did you start the blog? You said you were feeling better, and then you started the blog. Did it help you continue down that road of feeling better, or did you do it and then it made you feel better?
No, it was therapy. And I didn't even think people would read it. It was all for me. My sisters and I had family blogs, and I found that I was writing a lot about the diabetes. So I thought, I'll just make a separate blog about the diabetes, and then I can go through my feelings. And it was so therapeutic that I could write out my feelings and sleep at night, which was big for me, because I am one of those people that lays in bed and goes through the whole day and what I could have done better and worries about the next day and what's going to happen. So when I wrote everything out, I was so much more relaxed and able to sleep and handle everything so much better. And it was just this happy coincidence that people started actually reading it, and I found others.
What year did you start blogging?
2009.
Okay. I'm really only asking for myself, because I feel like you've been there since the beginning for me, which was really the very beginning of 2007. He was diagnosed in December of 2006. Yeah. And then, when you're talking about your kids, you have to kind of be careful about how much you share. Did they know you were blogging?
They always knew I was blogging. When I started, they were very young. I'm very careful in the way I blog. There's no blaming. There's no pointing fingers. It's mostly my side of things, not their side of things. Not a lot of specifics sometimes. There was a lot of pushback in the beginning. Well, not a lot, but from other people in the community, the diabetes community, wondering if it was a good thing to blog about children because, they have no say in it, and someday they're going to go back and read it, and how are they going to feel? And they can't really consent to it, even though they knew about it. But I knew that this community and these parents of type 1 children felt so alone. And when I found other people, it healed me in a way that the power of same is so healing. I didn't want to take that away from the people that were reading. I wanted them to understand that I knew what they were going through. So I felt that my blog was doing much more good than any harm that it would bring to my children. And I've always reassessed and gone back and read things. And I don't know, maybe it's just the way that I write, but I don't think I've ever embarrassed my kids or said something that they're going to be unhappy about later in life. And I've never pointed a finger or blamed them for anything, any mistakes. I'm harder on myself than anybody else.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that I can't think of an instance where in your blog you were even super specific or talked about, something went right or wrong. You don't really talk in those terms. And as you said, it's often after something has happened and you're kind of processing it. I'm glad you continued because you've been a huge help to me, especially as my son enters preteen, teenagedom, or whatever the heck 12 years old is supposed to be. Okay, just specifically, and I'm sorry if you have a younger kid or an older kid or if you're an adult with type 1, because Meri's going to give me the secret of raising teenagers with type 1.
Oh, no.
And, no, I'm just kidding. But making me feel better because we were talking off the air right before we started taping about the enormous, to me, amounts of insulin that I'm now giving my son just for basal rates. And you said that just gets, I don't want to say worse. That's not the right word. But it'll get stronger, the doses?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy the amount of insulin that they take going through puberty. And I'm just starting my 13-year-old on that stepping process of stepping up basal rates constantly. I think we went up 4 different times in 3 months already.
Oh, I feel so much better already. You just need to hold my hand for the next couple of years. Because I went up twice in the last 3 months significantly, and I'm getting nervous. And I don't know why that is. Every time I do it, I say to my husband, why do I think insulin doesn't work? After 10 years, why do I think we're doing something wrong?
Right. Why myself? And I tell the boys, when they see numbers flashing back at them and they get really frustrated and they think more than anything, they think I'm frustrated at them.
Right.
But I tell them, if you are doing your job, then those numbers are not your responsibility. They're my responsibility to tweak basal rates and the doctor's responsibility. Your responsibility is just to bolus when you eat and check your sugar.
Yep.
And that, if you're doing that, then you're doing your job. The guilt, there should be no guilt associated with those numbers. If they're high, I got to fix it. Now, if it's high because you're not bolusing for your meal, that is something that you need to work on. But for the most part, numbers, because they've had it their whole life, whether this is good or bad, numbers aren't, they're not as shocking as they should be. Having 3 teenagers with type 1.
I'm laughing because I totally understand.
When I married Doug, when I remarried and came and moved here and these numbers were popping up and the kids were announcing their numbers to me, Doug would look at me like, wait a minute, because he works, he's a manager in radiology department at the hospital, so he works in the medical system and knows about it. And it was quite a wake-up call for him. But he's adjusted
That's
quite
funny.
well.
Well, and this is a good time to start talking about your marriage to Doug and your marriage to Ryan. If you're not familiar with Meri, I'm not probing, I'm not being rude. This is a big part of her family's story. So, Meri, talk to me about Ryan if you could, because it does seem that the struggle that you two had together that ended so quickly is still very much a huge part of your family, as I would hope it would be for any family. But talk to me about Ryan. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2012?
Right. Melanoma. He had a couple years before a mole that was taken off that was tested positive for cancer. And he went through chemo for that. And afterwards, and after they had taken off the mole, every single thing showed negative for cancer. They took off a big thing from his back, they did his lymph nodes, they did everything, and everything was clear. But we did chemo just in case and felt like, okay, we've done it. And he went back and did blood tests periodically. But 2 years later, his leg felt really heavy. And I had him go to the emergency room because I thought he had a blood clot in his leg, obviously. So he went alone. I was at church at the time. And when I met up with him after church in the emergency room, he said they did a brain scan. And I'm like, what? Why would they do a brain scan? They need to be like doing a scan on your leg and finding your blood clot. And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, I'm waiting for the results. And I'll just never forget when the phone rang and the doctor got the results. The gasp from the doctor.
Oh my.
And his face coming in there that he had 4 large brain tumors. And later we found out there were tumors in his chest cavity. And so it just that was 2 years after his original diagnosis. And it was a 6-month time period before we lost him after that.
And you write, you have, on your Our Story page on your blog, you talk about that even with all of the tumors in his brain, he was still himself and until the end. And that's, listen, I'm not good at talking about this stuff. I don't know anybody is, but that just seems like, such a gift to have him up until the end. Was it that way, or was it awful?
It was a miracle. He was Ryan until the last day. And when we got the last brain scan and, I got a call from the doctor saying, there's too many tumors to count. There's hundreds. And they said, I don't know how he's walking right now. I don't know how he's alive with this many brain tumors. And that night we played, a game, a numbers game, and he won. So, he was till the last day, Ryan. And that was the biggest blessing for sure.
I remember, and this was a time before we had met, that the Diabetes Online community, which, if you haven't heard that term before, it's not like a club. It's just refers to anybody who's online blogging or speaking about type 1 diabetes, or really type 2 as well, any kind of diabetes. And that community talking and tweeting and sending out messages about your family at that time. And there was this thinking, I seem to really remember this, like, isn't this enough that she has 3 kids with type 1? Why does this have to happen as well? Did you respond to any of that? Did that kind of sink into you? I mean, I don't want to sound like woe is me. I mean, this is awful stuff. But I remember thinking, how can she keep going through this stuff?
I was more upset that I never really, I think just in the very beginning, I thought about losing him, that I might lose him. And I was more upset at the fact that here I have a husband that I love, and we have a wonderful relationship, and why us? We love each other. We have children and we have a great life. Why us? At first, that's how I thought about it. But Ryan wouldn't let that way of thinking continue. If you spent 5 minutes with him, you would know that the only option was everything's going to be okay. And there was no wallowing ever. It was always positivity. It was always forward. It was always what's next. And we never talked about him dying ever, not even at the end. And it only really got scary the last few days before he passed. Before that, it was just him marching forward and being Ryan.
Now, you were in California at the time?
Uh-huh.
Do you have a lot of family there? I remember seeing a lot of your posts about your church family too, but do you have family there?
Yeah. Yes, I had. Well, at the time, my parents were there, his parents were there, and his sister, his family. And I had a very close church family, whereas those 6 months that Ryan was diagnosed, I didn't make one dinner. They brought me, and I'm not kidding, every single meal. And then I also had my diabetes family. So I had this huge support group that lifted me up, and people online constantly sending me positivity and love and get thoughtful gifts in the mail. And there was a GoFundMe account, and people were putting tens of thousands of dollars in there. And it was just like, how can I wallow when I am just surrounded by goodness and love and kindness and, everybody around the world, people around the world were praying for us and praying with us. And, I think that, when we're going, if you contrast that with how things are today, with how negative Facebook is and the divide that there is, and I can look back at that and say, wait a minute, people are good. And it doesn't matter, politically what they think. All people everywhere of every race and religion and thought processes are good. They want to help. Sometimes they don't know how to help.
When, after Ryan died and you had all of that love and support around you, did it stay around you? Did it help you to get through that time with your children?
Yeah, yes. It was, I had to step back a little bit, and I was lucky where I could stay home with them for about 6 months and focus on them and raising and getting the boys through the worst, what I thought was the worst of it. But, people would come and make me go out to lunch, and I didn't wear makeup for the first couple months because I was very on edge. So they would take me to different cities to have lunch so I wouldn't run into anybody that I knew. Everybody was very kind and sweet. So yeah, it definitely went beyond, they sacrificed their Friday nights with their husbands to go out with me, so that I wouldn't be so lonely.
Wow. When, during all of this, and forgive me for messing up the timeline a bit, but Max went on a mission trip. And I bring it up because, you were putting a lot of these things on Facebook. And here's your oldest, who doesn't have type 1, but still, you're sending him to a different country. He's on his own with a group.
Right.
When was that? Was that shortly after Ryan's death? To me, it seems like it was around the same time.
It was a year after.
Year after.
Oh, no, it wasn't a year after, was it? It was only 6 months after.
Yeah, I remember it seemed that it was an amazing step for your family.
Yeah. It was, and it was a big decision, but I wanted it for him if that's what he wanted. I never expected my kids to go on missions. Ryan never expected Max to go on a mission. And he made that decision on his own. And of course I'm going to support it 100%. But like I said, Max is that sweet, kind of glued us all together. Mm-hmm. So him leaving was a big, losing Ryan and then having Max leave too, it made the whole a little more obvious.
Well, and I'm just going to jump in, Meri, and just explain, or ask you to explain. When I say mission, where I live here in the South, in North Carolina, a lot of people think, well, they go to Haiti for a week, or they'll go and build a church for a month. But this was different, right? This was a long time commitment.
And this was a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, and there's no, I could only speak to him on the phone twice a year at Christmas and Mother's Day. And Monday were his days where he was allowed to write us. So thankful for email that I was able to get an email from him every Monday and we could write to him. So I had communication with him every week.
Wow.
But it was hard and it was a big growing process for him. But man, he's an amazing adult.
And he went to Mexico?
Yeah.
See, I feel like I know you so well just from Facebook. Are any, this is, and forgive me, I don't know a lot about, as you said, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Is it something that most kids go on as young adults? Will your other sons do this as well?
A lot of kids do. I don't know. I don't think Jack is, but you know, he might change his mind. And I don't know. I don't know what they'll choose, but I support them in any path that they go on. Really.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm their mother. So I have no expectations on their life. I just want them to grow and be happy in any direction that they go.
Well, and then speaking of any direction, I mean, you know, you're in California, you've got Max off in Mexico, you're trying to, you know, continue life and raise your kids. How did you meet Doug?
I met Doug online. I was pushed by some very sweet friends to go online. I went online. It was a terrible, terrible thing. I don't recommend people dating online. Really a lot of crazies. I gave up on it, but hadn't taken my profile down from the website. And I got a message from Doug. And it turns out we had mutual friends. And, you know, so it wasn't like he was really a stranger. But what was really refreshing was we kind of went back and forth with no expectation that this was I wasn't really ready to meet somebody. And I don't know if he was either. So we really didn't, like every time I'd send him a message, I thought, well, maybe I'll hear back from him. Maybe I won't. And then he'd send me a message a week later. It was just really casual. And it was just surprising because I called him the boring guy from Indiana because he was so, you know, normal. Everybody online, I don't want to say everybody, but everybody I came in contact with was a bit crazy.
I would love to talk to you about that either offline or for maybe another type of podcast.
Not pretty. I was just like, and think I didn't have to meet anybody, but just the small back and forth I had was just like, too much. So he was just normal, which was refreshing, but I was just like waiting for the red flags. And once he came actually to California and we were supposed to meet, and I was like, you know what? I'm not ready for this.
Oh.
And so when he got to the airport to leave to go back, he called me, and it was the first time we talked. And the conversation was so amazing. It just kind of went from there. It just gradually it wasn't nothing pushed. We talk every week, and we ended up talking every day, and then we ended up Skyping, and then we met in person. And once after those, 4 months of really getting to know each other and then meeting in person, it was kind of like a done deal. He was just amazing.
That's great. Now, I know a lot of adults with type 1 or who are dating try to figure out when to reveal to their potential partner that they have type 1, or should they talk about it at all, or, that kind of stuff. How do you tell somebody, hey, by the way, I know it's difficult to have a relationship like this to begin with, and you have 5 kids and I have 4 kids, but...
Yes, that was the fun part of it, is that I was trying to scare him away. I was like, I'm not going to pretend to be anything that I'm not. And I'm just going to be who I am. And I'm going to let him know straight out of the gate, my life's complicated and this is who I am. And so I let him no, right away. And he was just like, that doesn't scare me. My brother-in-law has type 1. One of my best friends who's a coworker was diagnosed with type 1 with me a couple years ago. So he was familiar with it and he didn't think of it as any big deal. So, which should have been a red flag. Right? It's a big deal.
Well, I was just going to ask you, what does he think now? Does he get it? It's a more of a big deal.
He gets it. And he's so sweet. He sent me to my sister for my birthday. He gave me a trip to see my sister for her birthday, her 40th. And he flew me out there for 5 days. So and this isn't the first time he's been alone with the boys, but of course, the first night I'm gone, Ben runs out of insulin during the night and wakes up with ketones and throwing up. And, he's searching for the ketone blood strips that I only have a few left. So he was 100% in. Stayed home from work that morning to make sure he was okay. And I couldn't ask for a more sweet, loving guy. He's all in, and I'm very fortunate.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about type 1, because I know you've learned everything in the last, 20 years or so, and let's impart some wisdom. I'm just kidding. But, when you talk about somebody who's diagnosed as a kid, as all three of your boys were, very young, now they're teenagers, almost young adult age here. How does that transition go? How do you go from doing everything for them? Give me your hand. I'm gonna test your blood sugar. I'm gonna do the inset. I'm gonna fill your cartridge. To trying to get them to be more independent. Was that a challenge for you? I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know a lot of 14-year-olds who are independent on anything. That much anyway, but how's that transition going for you?
Okay, well, let me tell you, right out of the gate, it was a piece of cake. My husband had passed away, and maybe it just changed, it's a different circumstance than everyone else. And I was going back to school full time, and they needed to be independent, and they needed to put in their own sets. And so they did it, and they took it, and they were amazing. And they were like these rock stars, and I'm so proud of them. And then they're like, I'm over it. And so it kind of all went downhill from there.
Wow, they're normal kids. That's nice.
Unfortunately, I know what their potential is, so that doesn't help them. But they're kind of over this whole diabetes thing. So that's why we've been shaking things up. I got the Dexcom for the first time, got 3 of them last October. And they've been wearing those almost consistently. And that's helped a lot. And then just last week, the 2 oldest got new tandem pumps because they've been wearing the same Medtronic. I know it's been like different upgrades of it, but really it's the same pump their entire lives. It doesn't look different.
Yeah.
It does the same thing. It's just that there's nothing. It's just like, it's like the DOS version of pumps. And so what I've been trying to do is mix it up for them.
Do you think people will know what DOS is even?
I don't know.
Isn't that funny?
Maybe it's like the PC to the Mac. I don't know. Is that a good comparison?
Yeah, or it's like the Oregon Trail to what are people playing? To Call of Duty.
Yes. And the new Medtronic pump just it looks like an old iPod. It just doesn't do it for me. And it goes hand in hand with their CGM. And, God bless them. They're trying, but that CGM is just not the Dexcom right now. So I just kind of had to veer off course with these 2 because they needed something cool, something different. And these T-Slims, hopefully already they're in a contest to see, because maybe I'm a terrible person, but I said, I'm going to be downloading your new pumps next week. And whoever boluses the most, is going to get $20. And they are on it. So,
but no, see, I'm with you because I was a little bit afraid you were going to say whoever has the best numbers.
No.
But see, that's so smart.
Never about the numbers.
Yeah.
Never, ever, ever get shocked about numbers. It's fix it. Do you know what the problem was? Okay, let's try not to do that again. Never. And that all stems from diabetes camp. We went to diabetes camp once as a family and probably will never go again. When you have 3, it's very overwhelming. But when we went, Jack came up to me and said, Mom, I have to talk to you. When I have my counselor told me I need to talk to you. When I have high blood sugars, I feel as though you're upset at me. And that just took the wind out of me because he was only 8 at the time. Mm-hmm. This is this little kid, it's not your fault. I'm the one and at that point, I was the one doing all the work. I was the one counting the carbs and telling him what to do. What was he doing? Nothing. Right. So I told him what he was seeing was this disappointment in myself, not but it was mirroring over to him. So after that point, we made it a thing in our family that you cannot get upset about a number. Now, if your number is high and it's constantly because you're not bolusing for dinner, then we need to have a conversation. Right. But if it's just, par for the course, it is what it is, and we'll fix it and move on.
I'm just thinking about your diabetes cabinet or whatever you must use in your home. Where do you put everything?
Well, I used to have this whole 4 cabinets that had everything in it in my old house. This house, I just have like a little buffet that has everything in it. Buffet. Yeah, it's just this little, it's a cabinet, but it's our diabetes place where everything is. And it's got everything you could need.
Yeah, I think about it in our kitchen. It seems to grow. It was like this big at first, and then you get a pump, and then you get a CGM, and then you have all the stuff you already had and don't want to throw out for some weird reason.
Oh, we're hoarders, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even mean the stuff that works, but the stuff like, old meters and pumps, and they just shove them way up high, and no one, they just stay there for years.
I know.
It's like the diabetes museum.
With their pumps came 2 Vario one-touch meters.
Yeah.
And we don't use those. So it was just like, okay, I'll just add them to the 30 other meters that we don't use. And really, I should put this online and ask if anybody needs these meters is really the thing that I should do.
Right. Well, they need test strips. The meters are like the printer, right? And then you need the ink. That's how they sell them.
Zombies come and we need them.
Hey, thinking about your blog over the years, is there any particular post that stands out to you that got a reaction, good or bad, that you wish, that either you kind of wish you didn't write or that you're really glad that you shared?
Of all my posts, the one that sticks out to me the most is diabetes is a sailboat. Mm. And it talks about how when your child is diagnosed, you have to put them on the sailboat and the separation that you feel as you're on shore with your feet planted firmly and they're on the waters and they are susceptible to the weather, and how you sit with your telescope on the shore trying to control the weather, and the days when they're close to shore and, you can hitch up with them and enjoy the sunset and see the other sailboats out there and enjoy the beautiful views, and the children behind you that are playing, that are free to go home whenever they want and don't have the worries that our children who have to captain these boats 24 hours a day do. And I think of all of my posts, I think that just captures our life.
It's a beautiful post. And I'll make sure to link it up at diabetes-connections.com. As soon as you said it, I remembered it, and the imagery is so spot on and yet so beautiful at the same time. That's a great one. Before I let you go, Meri, something I'm asking all of my guests this year is, what advice would you give a newly diagnosed family? I mean, our perspective is as parents, so it could be for an adult with type 1, but what would you tell a mom or dad or kid that just found out that the child has type 1?
I would tell them all is well. It's going to be okay. And not to lose hope in a brighter future, a easier future. It does get easier. It's still a lot of work, but things do do become second nature, and your child will surprise you with their resilience, and that will fuel you to make things as simple as you can for them while you can. Because, and you know, someday they're going to be gone, and you're going to wish that you could do all this stuff for them. Jack went away to college, and I can't tell you how hard that is, not being able to get up and check him in the middle of the night and make sure that he checked in the morning and, you know, let him fly. And even though this has been part of him literally his entire life, it's hard. And I do, as hard as they were, I long for the days when I had all that work. And I hate handing it over to them, but it just, don't give up that hope. Your children will surprise you. It's going to be okay. That's what I would tell them.
That's fantastic.
I'd love to leave it there, but I just have to ask about college. Did you work hard on that transition before he went?
No.
Good. I'm glad. But really, I mean, he said, Mom, I've got this. Yes. And then you worry, right? That's what you have to do.
Yes, that's all it is. It's just a bunch of worry that you stuff down to your feet, and you walk around like you weigh 500 pounds every day because you're so worried. But thankfully, he was rooming with Max, so my son. So he was with Max, you know, while he was sleeping. So, since he was with his brother, it took some of it away. And I could ask Max, have you seen him checking his sugar? He's like, I think so. I know he's changing his set. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. So, yeah, I have Max, you know, Max knows. And Max, you know, before he went on his mission, he would, you know, be up at 1 a.m. and he'd check the kids for me and write the numbers on the whiteboard and correct them and feed them if they needed to. So he is just, you know, a diabetes savant on his very own. So now that Jack's going to go back in the spring, I don't think he's going to be rooming with Max, and that'll be a whole another ball game that I just don't even want to think about. So one worry at a time, right, Stacey?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I'm just still in the middle of the first year of middle school. So we're dealing with that. That's exciting enough for right now.
Right.
Was there anything you wanted to mention that I didn't get to? No, I think that's about it. Oh, I know you did something on the Spare a Rose campaign. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just would like to put a plug into that people donate money to the IDF and help other people around the world get access to insulin, because we are so, as expensive as insulin is here in the United States, we are blessed to have it at our fingertips, and it doesn't take much just to help. A little bit goes a long way in other countries. So for the price that you would spend on a dozen roses, buy 11. Instead, give that extra rose money to the International Diabetes Federation through the Spare a Rose campaign, and help others. Spread the love and life.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. That was just incredible. It was great to catch up with you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Isn't she great? Oh, more from Meri, her blog, and that sailboat post linked up at diabetes-connections.com. I just love talking to her. I always feel so positive after I read one of her posts, but she makes a good point. That positivity doesn't just come out of thin air. You really have to work at it, and it's not the whole story. Sometimes stuff just goes wrong, and you have to acknowledge it. But I really thought on this Valentine's Day, it was a nice story. I mean, it's just, what are the odds that you're going to have the love of your life and then, taken by cancer, and then you find love again? It's a wonderful story. I love that. All right, so I was in California at the JDRF walk late last year. And so for our community connection this week, I wanted to talk about somebody I met there. One of the vendors was handing out samples of ProYo. This is a high-protein frozen yogurt. Now, the company donates a lot to JDRF and to the Special Olympics as well, and I wanted to learn more about them. Now, I need to let you know that after we taped this interview, they did send me a big package of samples, which also came with dry ice, which Benny thought was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen, it is really kind of cool. But the package, the samples, this was not a quid pro quo. I mean, they didn't pay me for the interview. They didn't tell me this stuff was coming until after. They didn't give me questions to ask. They're not a sponsor of the show, although that can be arranged. But Benny loved the yogurt because I let him have one, as a dessert or a treat after school where I normally would not have. I mean, this is 15 to 17 carbs, depending on the flavor, and about 20 grams of protein, just for reference. Oh, and Nathan Carey here, the CEO, he does have a cold. You'll hear that a little bit, but we make it through. Nathan, thanks so much for spending some time with me. I know you're a little under the weather, a little sore throat, but you sound good, and I'm glad you were able to come on. Good to talk to you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, I first saw ProYo out at the JDRF walk that I went to out in California. And looking into this a little bit more, you have a really interesting story. So before we talk about why you guys were at a JDRF event, take me back to how this all started, because you had a really bad injury, and that somehow led to this, right?
Correct. I actually had just started a smoothie coffee bar that specifically offered only healthy items, toppings, that really was hyper-focused on making parents not feel guilty when their children were trying to get frozen yogurt. That served balanced nutrition. And right after I had started that company, which was called Twin Cups, I broke my arm in 3 spots and lost the mobility of my fingers for about 6 months. They thought that I was never going to move my fingers again. And when I was going through physical therapy and rehab, it was really interesting because time slows down and you see all kinds of walks of life while you're in there. And, I was able to actually watch facial expressions from seniors to children to adults to professional athletes, you name it, across the board. People were all trying to eat healthy or get high protein into their diet prior to their workout or after their workout. And what really struck me that was so interesting about that was the reaction on their face when they would try to consume these products, because most of them lacked on sensory feel. They also downright didn't taste very well. And there were large massive amounts of volume in order to consume to get the nutritional value that they were trying to go for.
So you're looking around the physical therapy and you're watching people make like awful faces as they're drinking protein shakes? Is that
or eating protein goos, protein bars, you name it. And it's like, wow, here's a person that's trying to be healthy. They're trying to eat good. They want to eat something that actually tastes good, yet they're really not enjoying this experience. And the thing that I found even more fascinating besides that is when you flipped over these items and you actually looked at the nutritional panel, and, there was gums, stabilizers. Most of them were overloaded with sugar. The calories weren't balanced. And it's like, wow, I mean, people are really trying to be healthy and eat something healthy that's good for them, yet at the end of the day, the majority of these products actually weren't balanced nutrition. Yes, they were delivering on high protein, but they were sacrificing on so many other elements, whether that was sugar levels, calorie levels, fat levels, sodium levels. And it just blew me. It seriously blew me away. I couldn't believe it.
So you recovered,
Yep.
at least enough, to move forward with this. I'm glad you're doing much better. And then you had the idea to make something that tastes good. And again, not trying to make this a commercial for ProYo, but I did have it. It is tasty. But, how do you develop something like that? I'm curious about the process. Is it a question of sitting in a kitchen and, making recipes and tasting? Do you invite all your friends over?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So my original background is construction management, and so I approached it very similar to building a property or developing a project, in that I went and assessed all the items out in the marketplace and literally filleted them out on a table and basically formulated an Excel spreadsheet of the pros and cons that I personally thought of those specific products, whether it was taste profile, volume profile, nutritional profile. From there, I then expanded and met with a couple different doctors that were working with children going through hematology, oncology, and then also being treated through chemotherapy, along with meeting with a couple of dietitians, nutritionists, professional athletes, and then also a bunch of food bloggers that were working in the natural sector. And what I did was I showed them these everyday topics. I'm not going to list the names of them, but you definitely know them and see them in your everyday life, and said, look, of these products, what do you love of these products and what do you not love about these products? And what are you willing to give on and what are you not willing to give on? And basically formed a hierarchy on what I was going to deliver in the end product. And my ultimate goal was basically developing a blueprint or a product that was not niche specific to a superior athlete, but something that somebody could have, whether they were a child, an adult, a senior, somebody with a compromised immune system, someone who was a diabetic, someone who had gastrointestinal issues, the whole gauntlet. Because the whole thing that I found really interesting when I was going through rehab was you have these people that would love to live a healthy lifestyle and enjoy what they eat. And the biggest thing is a smile. And what I was finding was here are all these people trying to consume these products that are supposedly supposed to be good for them, but they really didn't chalk up to the nutritional values, and most of the time they actually weren't smiling when they were eating it. And that was my ultimate goal, is how do I achieve that and really deliver on taste, mouthfeel, and nutritionally, like meet all those components.
So I have another question about selling a frozen product like this, because that just seems like a really hard food to schlep around and tell retailers, hey, you want this. It's not like a can of soup that'll hold up in your car or,
Right.
No one wants to think about food as holding up for a long time anyway. But I would just think ice cream is tough to not only break into, because I'm thinking about all the frozen products in my grocery store, but it just doesn't stay long. I mean, how hard was it to break in like that?
Yeah, so when you kind of look at the hierarchy of the grocery stores, when you look at it from a real estate perspective, the frozen section is the hardest section to break into in all of grocery. There's limited space. It's the most expensive to transport from A to B, and there's very limited time they give you a chance to accelerate or actually prove yourself within the space. The other issue also is there's very little startups in that section. Typically, it's dominated by the massive players like a Nestle or a Unilever. Whether you see their brand on the front of the packaging, it's most likely a label that's theirs, manufactured by them. So you nailed it right on the dot in regards to it being really strategically hard to go into. But what's also interesting about it is, specifically for that better for you healthy category, there's not much that really exists within that set, and there really has been a lack of innovation specifically around dairy and frozen desserts and ice cream products focused on health that really specifically looks on delivering on balanced nutrition. And so that's where I kind of saw a gap. The other reason why I went for that specific niche market was because I had started the frozen yogurt bar and the coffee bar, and I was able to use that as an actual pilot testing ground in real time to see what flavors people liked, what they like to integrate into their yogurt, how much protein they actually were willing to pay for per serving, and that type of thing. So it kind of pigeonholed me into that section, and I ran with it. Also, as a kid, I loved ice cream. I still love ice cream. In our freezer, we were like the household that had like all the flavors of ice cream, all the popsicles, you name it. So it was kind of a natural fit for me to go after that. And the other part about what really intrigued me about the ice cream set is no matter what type of mood you are in or what type of experience you're going through, typically you associate ice cream with a smile. And when people are going through a rough time, it's awesome to watch them, experience whether they're licking an ice cream cone, scooping ice cream, making a smoothie, or a breakfast bowl. It's pretty rare you see someone not smiling when they interact with that. And that's really one of the big reasons why I went for the ice cream market.
My very first job when I was 15 was scooping ice cream at a Baskin-Robbins in the Jefferson Valley Mall in Westchester County, New York. And I can vouch for that. Nobody walks up to the ice cream counter sad. Or they might come up looking not that great, but they always leave happy.
Yeah.
It's such a great feeling when, especially the little kids are kind of popping up to, and then I realized what hard work it was. And we had to wear really ugly uniforms. But it was still a fun job. Hey, I saw ProYo, as I said, at the JDRF walk I went to out in California. You don't have diabetes yourself, but you do support and donate to JDRF. I saw that on your website. I'm curious, how did that come up? Why do you do that? You don't donate to dozens and dozens of charities. Why JDRF?
So it's really interesting. One of my uncles is a part of the Special Olympics. And we've always been huge advocates of the Special Olympics and donated product to the Special Olympics. But while I was designing this product and being around the Special Olympics and being a volunteer and watching my uncle participate, it was always very apparent that most of those athletes suffered from diabetes and also had very restricted diets based off of the medications they were on. And it was interesting because here you have these big events where typically you would see like an ice cream vendor, or you would see a cotton candy vendor, or you would see some type of item that typically isn't very healthy for you, but it's seen as like a treat or a celebration type of thing. And, so many times we'd be at these after party events where 90% of those athletes couldn't partake in the dessert or the treat because it didn't meet their dietary needs. And so that really struck home to me. And in fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we actually did a clinical trial on our product through GI Labs in Canada and actually took blood insulin levels of 25 different members of a panel for 2 weeks to actually get a true low glycemic rating on our product. And so that really goes to show what we believe in as far as supporting diabetes, not just going in and like doing the calculation on the calories, but actually doing a real true clinical trial. The other thing that really pushed me kind of in that direction as well is how I mentioned to you really trying to advocate a smile and being not a niche product, but something that everybody can enjoy. And what I found when I was working with some of these doctors in the hospitals and also the nutritionists and the dietitians was, the lack of enjoyment of real food in the hospital setting due to the fact that it needs to meet all these boxes to be checked off. And one of the biggest ones, of course, is sugar. And the association with there really isn't that many products that deliver on enjoyment, taste, and fun that fit kind of within the realm of being a low glycemic product, especially when it gets lumped into kind of the dessert segment. And so that's what really kind of pushed me in that direction. But then, of course, you start looking at what kind of foundations or what type of events you can kind of mirror that with to share that and shed the light to people that things do exist like that. And JDRF was just kind of a natural fit for that.
I did read that you're dyslexic. You have some challenges yourself. Did you know that you were dyslexic as a kid, or did you realize it later on?
It was really interesting. I was never a student as a younger child, and then I think it was like in 5th grade, someone finally kind of said, oh, wow, on your multiple choice tests, like, we know you know the answers. We know you've been paying attention, but you're always marking off the wrong bubble, and it's always either to the left or the right. It's not like you're choosing D when the answer's A, you're choosing B. And that kind of honed in on it. And then from there, everything kind of shedded light. I was always a horrible speller, super super slow at reading and always kind of switching numbers around. And so then at that point, I was able to actually have knowledge of it and then kind of learn the tricks of kind of correcting that, or the shortcuts of, not making the mistakes, or, the little tricks with rulers where like you guide yourself so you don't miss the line. I mean, all those kind of idiosyncrasies.
Do you think it's affected or shaped your business outlook at all?
Definitely. I mean, there's no question about it. A lot of people ask me, what are the things you like to learn the most from? And the biggest thing for me is failure. I don't look at failure as failure. I look at it as forward-thinking and how you then adapt to not repeat those steps, or how you kind of broaden your perspective on how you approach things. And I would say that really stems from growing up with dyslexia, because it's like, you might not necessarily get an A on a test, but you knew the items that you were going for. And so you just got to kind of reformulate how you approach that with a teacher, or express that to somebody that you actually know what's going on. And just because you can't get it in the right bubble doesn't necessarily mean that you're not absorbing the information.
The last question here is the natural, where can we find the product?
You can find ProYo in most of your natural stores, also through big banner stores like Kroger, Safeway, Ahold. We're nationwide now. If you just go to our website, there's a store finder that you can actually put in your zip code, and it will direct you to the closest retailer within your area.
More information about ProYo at diabetes-connections.com. I should also mention that when Nathan talked about people in the Special Olympics having a high incidence of diabetes, my radar went up a little bit. I don't know a lot about the Special Olympics in terms of that detail, so I went ahead and I looked it up, and there have been quite a few medical papers written up on the health challenges other than the condition that actually gets someone into and qualifies them for the Special Olympics. And apparently, type 2 diabetes and type 1 is a higher incidence among people in the Special Olympics. So that's true. He didn't have the exact numbers. I asked him for that afterward, and I was unable to find true statistics on it. But I found one or two medical papers that did confirm that. I thought that was pretty interesting. Keep learning stuff. All right, well, thanks again for joining me this week. I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you're listening all the way through, thank you so much. Please share the show with somebody that you know who is touched by type 1 diabetes. Email it if you get the newsletter, or, share it on Facebook if you're listening that way. And if you're listening on a podcast app like iTunes or Stitcher, do me a favor and subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, go ahead and leave a review. I'd really appreciate that as well. So much good stuff coming up. Spare a Rose campaign continues. In fact, I'm going to continue that throughout the month of February. And as you listen, I'll make a little pitch here. If you would like to make a donation to Spare a Rose through your business like Julie did with Wild Tree, or if you're interested in advertising on Diabetes Connections, please let me know. Stacy at diabetes-connections.com. It's STACEY. I'm not trying to make a fortune here with the podcast, but I am not going to ask you as a listener to pay to listen in any way, shape, or form. We spend enough money on diabetes. You don't need to pay for this podcast. So I pay for it through the sponsorships, travel expenses, technical stuff, website hosting, all that good stuff. It adds up. So let me know if you're interested in that. Lots of great stuff to come in the weeks to come. I got an email, and the first line was, "Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm the only 7-fingered diabetic speaker, adversity coach, and elite power lifter you know." So I talked to Chris Rudin. He's a pretty amazing guy, and he was so much fun to talk to. We are going to share that interview next week, so I hope you can tune in. Thank you again for joining me. I'm Stacy Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacy Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.